There is a fruit fly buzzing around in here that's gonna drive me batshit if I don't end that thing. I'll see it again. If you see me like clap really quickly, it's either I got really excited with something that you did or I'm killing that fly. Heller, you want to get that one too? Heller, how did you enjoy Shovel Knight? I'm curious. I don't think I've been able to ask you that. Fruit fly batshit. Yes, both euphemisms for my state of consciousness, AM or PM. I vacillate between fruit fly or batshit. It's important. It's important to have recognize that spectrum. Mindfulness skill check-in. Recognize the spectrum on which I exist any given point in time. My little fruit fly, my little batshit. I did everything in turn, but also had two people in chat with a guide. I still couldn't figure it out, a lot of the puzzles. Some of them were, yeah, I think that's the roadblock that I hit, is that they were a little too obscure. Like, I get that game was made by one developer who did the music, the story, the world building, everything. But I think it's an example of where they would have benefited from, I'm sure they play tested it too, but would have benefited from some additional feedback of, hey, I get that you've built this wonderful world, but here's a few aspects where I think this only made sense to you. And, there are some rewards gleaned from like sussing a little bit of esoteria, but that's kind of a niche audience to expect to click with every convoluted puzzle that you put in the game. Not that I'm shit talking Tunic. I still think it was a lot of fun. I hit a barrier there. That was one that I ended up watching people finish versus me doing it. As the game goes on, but yeah, Devin way too far down the rabbit hole in Tunic as a solo dev. Yeah, just like anybody story crafting, you benefit from some feedback of, hey, I get this makes sense to you, but it also has to make sense to other people. Like, it's got to click. We want a little resistance there. But not too much. Diminishing returns if there's too much resistance there. I'm glad you're enjoying Shovel Knight too. That's another one with a banging soundtrack. I've got some of those tunes embedded in a couple of the playlists on here too. Curious about the map thing. So, like, you're saying for the no map in Mina the Hollower, you just kind of have to rely on your hippocampus. You're building that mental map every time you go back in and using like context clues to remember where to go. That sounds like it might be a little tedious at first, but that's actually really good for our brains. One of the puzzles in Tunic requires you to go to a website outside of the game. You go to a website outside the game, use dev tools on the site, and read a puzzle in the hint source code. Oh shit! This is the game within the game. What do you call that? When that's done, what is that called? The developer for Inscription does that a lot, where they like have, I don't know. I guess they're considered like value adds or something, but community-based IRL games that people can play. Like for Inscription, for example, like one of the IRL games that was attached to that is people had to go find a geocache that they hid. And then there were other puzzles along the way that kind of like tied a very dark story together with other games kind of in that world, which are fascinating. Like that's another YouTube rabbit hole that's totally worth going down when you can't sleep. There's a specific little bit of verbiage for that though that I'm not remembering right now. And I don't know, maybe y'all know, maybe it'll come to me later. How about some good news? Updated 5 to 7 minutes ago, but this released on Sunday, I believe. So this is kind of a newsletter that I subscribe to. Substack from So Informed. They're actually my like Insta feed, and I liked what they saw. I saw them from across the internet, and I really liked the vibe. Some good news. New data released this week showed that in May, for the first time ever, solar energy supplied more of the nation's electricity than coal, or 12.8%, while coal supplied 12.2%. Its fourth lowest monthly share ever. Big, beautiful, clean coal. Clean, delicious coal. I use coal as a deodorant. Beautiful, clean coal. Have we ever considered running the data centers on coal? Data also revealed that solar became... My Trump's not very good. Data also revealed that solar became the third largest source of electricity in the US in May, behind natural gas and nuclear. French Polynesia announced the creation of the world's largest marine protection area at the UN Ocean Conference in France this week. The MPA will cover the entirety of the country's exclusive economic zone and will restrict extractive practices like deep-sea mining and bottom trawling, a destructive type of fishing that drags large nets across the seafloor. That sounds like it could become like an easy pejorative, like calling somebody a bottom trawler. You fucking bottom trawler. Like where you might call somebody a doorknob or a muppet, try bottom trawler. For a little extra left and right, you know? Hit him with that 1-2 bottom trawler. A destructive type of fishing that drags large nets across the bottom of the seafloor. Of that 1.9 million square miles, 424,712 square miles would be designated as a highly or fully protected area known as Class 1 or 2, where only traditional coastal fishing, ecotourism, and scientific exploration will be allowed. The government also pledged an additional 193,051 square miles to the highly protected area by World Ocean Day 2026. The New Zealand government... New Zealand, a real place, a real, not fictional place. The government announced the establishment of 5 new marine reserves along the Otago coast, marking the country's first new marine sanctuaries in over a decade. This newly designated framework, which encompasses 308 square kilometers, increases mainland New Zealand's total marine reserve coverage by nearly 50%. The reserves will officially take effect on July 1, 2026. Protected coastal waters will boast highly diverse habitats, including giant kelp forests, which I still think like kelp farms produce the most oxygen, above and beyond like trees. These areas serve as vital breeding feeding grounds for several globally threatened and iconic species. I almost dropped my coffee mug. That would have been horrendous. Among them are the yellow-eyed penguin, New Zealand sea lion, and albatross. I'm looking up a New Zealand sea lion right now. Anybody looks a bit curious what a New Zealand yellow-eyed penguin looks like? That's about the image I had in my head. That's your typical sea lion. They look more like kind of a pug, maybe? Pug lion? They're more like an otter face, I guess. Otter pug fusion dance. Otter pug fusion dance, you get one of those. Cute little buggers. Well, I'm into it. What were the... oh yeah, the yellow-eyed penguin. What are we protecting? Are they cute enough to give a fuck about? Honestly, they are. Let's protect the sea lions. Oh no. No, these can die. These can go extinct. They're not cute enough to save. I'm kidding. No, I like it. They're contemplative. The contemplative little shits. Look at them. Curious visage, as if to say, I'm up to something. This deep sea creature with no eyes looks exactly the same. It can't see lion. I can't see lion. Sun's out, buns out. You got your buns out? Put them in the breeze. Cool down from the hot day. Welcome in, Puff. Welcome in, Mondo. I'm giving us a little good news first. What animals we're protecting, even if they're not cute enough to save. Albatross are cool. I knew what an albatross was because I had a good childhood. Okay, I had a weird and fucked up childhood, but one thing I liked about it was watching The Rescuers and The Rescuers Down Under, and you know what it taught me? What an albatross was. You know who was voicing the albatross in The Rescuers and Rescuers Down Under? John Candy. John Candy's albatross was sort of like the 747 for Bernard and Bianca. That's them. Especially like this photo right here. I dig them. I see no resemblance, but I dig them. Puff, how are you? May your cheeks cool rapidly. And that communicates safety to the rest of your body. The rest of your butt cheeks on your body. More good news, the One Childhood, One Chance Alliance, made up of Save the Children and Children Investment Fund Foundation, the Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum Global Initiatives, UNICEF, Action Against Hunger, Alima, the Elma Relief Foundation, and others, announced a $500... That doesn't seem like much. $500 commitment to fight child malnutrition. I mean, we could raise $500 in a week. There's gotta be more. Is that a typo? Maybe it's 500 million? 500,000, 500 million. With that many organizations named, I would expect they're raising more than $500. Like, nope, we're setting our goals and our standards real low. Smart goals, mama. Specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time sensitive. Start low, work your way up. It's not a bad plan. Million. It's million. 500 million. It's a little more ambitious now. But it was easier to make fun of when it was $500. But I get it, yeah. Saving the kids is considered woke, so you know, they're not getting a lot of backing for that. The Alliance aims to reach at least 5 million children with life-saving nutrition. They're going to spread that $500 out 5 million ways. The Jersey City Council unanimously approved by 9-0 a resolution this week to divest from Citizens Bank over the funding of private prisons. Good. Our prison system is horrendous and a continuation of chattel slavery. Citizens Bank has provided roughly $2.5 billion towards ICE detention centers in New Jersey. Divest from them, defund them. This is the latest. This is the least we can do as a city to make sure we're not financially complicit with the financing of Delaney Hall. In a bipartisan vote, the House of Representatives passed the Faster Labor Contracts Act. This is separate news. The bill aims to amend National Labor Relations Act to require employers to bargain with newly organized workers within 10 days of voting to reform their union. The bill also provides a path to mediation if no agreement is reached within 90 days and a referral to arbitration to ensure first contracts are can be fairly resolved. Speaking of arbitration and class action settlements, anybody get their Facebook money from the Meta class action lawsuit? I had about $5 sent to my PayPal today, courtesy of that class action lawsuit. I don't know what I'm gonna do with all that. Maybe I'll add it. I'll add that $4 and change because it was not quite five. I'll add that $4 and change to the overwhelming $500 commitment from these other orgs because clearly they need it. Right? They're really making us feel that that resolution of justice sensitivity. Like we stuck it to them. Like they're doing that while on the other side of it still giving Meta like defense contracting spending money. Like there's your little slap on the wrist, but so long as you give us backdoor access to all of the data that you're harvesting from your user base, consider this a pay-to-play opportunity. Another trip around the board. Let's see. The reader view on this kind of cuts off the headlines that help me segment the news here. Oh yeah, Faster Labor Contracts Act. The bill aims to amend the National Labor Relations Act to require employers to bargain with newly organized workers within 10 days of voting to form their union. The bill also provides a path to mediation. Teamsters General President Sean O'Brien called the FLCA the most consequential labor bill to come before Congress in decades. Well, we do love labor organizing and very pro-union, so go them, and may they be an inspiration to others. Hey, you were involved in a data breach. Your medical info was leaked on a dark web. A settlement for damages was reached. Here's your check for 2.38. Yeah, if you remember to add your signature to a binding arbitration that says you will not sue them anytime in the future and any other future instances of wrongdoing, you're also agreeing, and this is like language that's written into most of those contracts, if you accept the money, I'm now guilty of this. I now get to say that Meta is indemnable from any wrongdoing for me for the foreseeable future because I took that money. What are you gonna do? I needed $4. Thing and stuff, and stuff and thing. And Puff is king of the stuff and thing. Korea's Ministry of Gender Equality of Family. Wait, Korea's Ministry of Gender Equality and Family. I want to be the Minister of Gender Equality and Family. Beyond my household. Announced this week that it will launch a pilot program in July to provide free public menstrual products through more than 700 dispensers installed across 12 local governments nationwide. The initiative, branded Paths for Everyone, aims to expand access to menstrual products beyond the government's existing voucher program for vulnerable adolescents to make the products more readily available in public spaces. Meanwhile, men in America don't know how to find the clitoris. Or when asked, what's menstruation? Can you do that? Get paid to get out of jail. Now, get back out there. Get back out there and play ball as long as you're playing for us. That's right, Mondo. Sure, your opponent only has a Baltic Avenue, but you have to completely crush their spirits for us, right? And work with other private equity when that Baltic Avenue is ready to be up for grabs. Squelch them, take them for everything they own, and make sure they can no longer compete in this open marketplace of capitalism ever again. Reminder that the game of Monopoly in its earliest iteration was literally a commentary on the pitfalls of capitalism. It was meant to be a lesson. It's meant to be a fun lesson. And then it was bought by what? Milton Bradley, Parker Brothers, whoever. Gamified even worse. And it made kind of a lighter hearted message of that very same thing. I wish Explorer were here to expound on that. He knows quite a bit more of that history too. As a game maker. What else we got? I have to approve morons? Everyone type morons. How interesting that in 4 years, would that be like the first instance of the word moron being in chat? Mondo, congratulations, you're the first to type moron in my chat. In this day and age, that verbiage is not grossly overtly used to marginalize a population. It's fine. In this case, we're using morons to punch up. And just like all good comedy and criticism, you want to be punching up. I'm surprised I didn't type. So it's a good word. I like dullard. I like rube. I especially like rube. We don't use rube enough. When's the last time you used rube? Show of hands. Last time you used rube. Use rube. But moron, like, don't let that one collect dust. Rube's even fun to say. You rube. Philadelphia City Council voted to approve legislation banning horse-drawn carriages from operating in the city. No more romantic retreats on a horse-drawn carriage. Has anybody ever taken a horse-drawn carriage, like done that on like a date night going into the city or something like that? It's cute until the horse takes a fat doo-doo pie right behind you. Or in front of you, depending. Like, sure, they get caught in that little canvas trap beneath them. It just takes the romance right out of it. I just saw that little fruit fly. Alright, so Philadelphia City Council voting to approve legislation to ban horse-drawn carriages. I mean, it's not done yet. Council member Mark Squia, who introduced the bill. I'm going with the double L-Y sound there, Squia, who introduced the bill. An animal welfare activist had been working to ban the practice for several years before Thursday's vote. The ban will take effect once Mayor Sherelle Parker, or Cherie, double L-Y sound. Wait, I guess if it were double, what would that be? Sherelle, yeah. Sherelle Parker signs it into law. A roundup of the courts actually doing something right this week. A judge ruled that Alabama, you ever go to Alabama? I got family out there in Alabama. Real good barbecue. Don't like the coleslaw. Don't like the coleslaw one bit. Too much poppy seed mayo in that. In Alabama. A judge ruled that Alabama's nitrogen gas executions constitute cruel and unusual punishment, but so does the death penalty. A judge in New Mexico dismissed a legal challenge to the state's universal child care program. The judge ordered Trump's officials to reinstall signs and exhibits national edit. Oh, this one actually was, I knew about that one. Judge ordered Trump officials to reinstall signs and exhibits at national parks on topics like slavery and climate change. Because remember, like I was saying earlier, rhyme, reason, rationale for MAGA administration to cut off the wallet for ongoing research as if it contained any language that it deemed associated with DEI. So our national parks and wildlife had a bunch of signage associated with lands once occupied, utilized by indigenous persons, marginalized persons, so on and so forth, that would have also been flagged for it inappropriately, but flagged for DEI. And on a lot of that, history was pulled because they're Nazis. A judge ruled that Trump's $100,000 fee for the H-1B visas is unlawful because if you make it more expensive to immigrate here and then work your way in to be a citizen, we're going to see fewer of them. So yeah, that I had to see that bullshit rolled back too. A federal judge indefinitely blocked Trump's $1.8 billion payout too. So this slush fund is the one that everybody was up in arms about, rightfully so, about it potentially being used to like reimburse like January 6th rioters, which was in the realm of plausibility. I've also been campaigning to bring back Nards. That's another one. I don't know if I'd place it in the category of like underutilized with Rube, but it's definitely Nards is definitely one I haven't used in a while. I'm gonna rotate that back in the vernacular. The use of Nards in a sentence, please. Not the off-brand nerds at the dollar store. Why are these Nards so much bigger and harder to chew? Someone will try to convince me, but I know horses don't have thumbs and can't draw carriages. Horse, they do, but they can still paint. They still have a need to create art, Mondo. Let them express. It's not just elephants. It's not just elephants who can create beautiful works of art for our U and Ari. Let's see. I do want to close the loop on this. Just because I meant to get to this yesterday and we didn't have time. And that was the end of the, not the end of Good News Forever, just the end of Good News listed in that article. If you want that to share or review on your own time, there it is. So yesterday we talked about dark triad traits as they relate to our president. Several members of his cabinet, and more or less the psychoeducational point to take home was how to recognize these traits to empower yourself to shut that shit down whenever you see it. Because they tend to be associated with personality types who conflate loudness with correctness. Which in many cases, sometimes somebody's being loud, it activates somebody's central nervous system and results in, kind of social hierarchies being reinforced, subservience and feeling quiet and shrinking down and that sort of thing. It practices, or it benefits from practicing some of the more vigilant skill sets and challenging these personalities when they do make themselves known so that they don't continue to rise to positions of power like management or the presidency. Curious thing about how manipulative these personality types are is that they can even communicate an expression and an interest in change and motivation to change, which may then communicate to their partners in any capacity that they're worth retaining in the in-group, which is even more revelatory and scary of how intelligent, wickedly intelligent some of them can be, because dark traits, personalities, the Machiavellianism associated with that, and the psychopathy associated with that, and the narcissism associated with that, make them very convincing liars. To a point. Meta-analysis of studies examining the relationship between the dark triad personality traits and personal values that found that higher dark triad traits tend to be associated with higher self-enhancement and openness to change values. There's more on this. On the other hand, their association with self-transcendence and conservation values tended to be negative. So what we'll see as it reveals later is, as long as there was some like self-interested benefit, there was an openness to change. But if there was a benefit associated with, like a greater good, not as likely to be motivated. Dark triad refers to, as I was saying earlier, narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. Narcissism involves an inflated sense of self-importance, a strong need for admiration, and tendency to feel entitled to special treatment. Also a lot of self-referential remarks in like conversation. Everything can turn back to them, with the exception of when something is a problem or accountability. That will not be them, that will be someone else. They will externalize that, and it's also a pattern with these personality types, is externalizing blame or externalizing accountability, offloading their emotions. Something else is anything adverse is someone else's problem outside of their own. To recap from yesterday, Machiavellianism refers to a cynical, manipulative, and strategic approach to other people, often involving deception when it serves personal goals. Psychopathy involves low empathy, limited guilt, impulsivity, emotional coldness, and a greater willingness to disregard rules or harm others. These traits overlap, but they're not identical. I'm glad it says that, because that was kind of a theme from yesterday, was overlap, but what stands out. A person may score high on one trait and relatively low on the others. People with higher dark triad scores may be more likely to exploit others, engage in manipulation, or prioritize personal advantage over cooperation. May be more likely to enjoy subservient relationships, want themselves a trad wife, However, some characteristics associated with these traits does not automatically mean that a person has a mental disorder or behaves harmfully in every situation. The Dark Triad is mainly used in personality research to study patterns of interpersonal behavior, leadership, relationships, and workplace conduct, because they are going to be attracted, these personalities are going to be attracted to power and places where they can achieve that. Study author Nikolay B. Petrov and his colleagues wanted to integrate the existing findings and the links between Dark Triad personality traits and values. Personal values are enduring motivational goals that help people consider important, motivational goals that people consider important in their lives and that guide their judgments, priorities, and behavior. Although values are generally stable, their relative importance can change in response to social experiences, life circumstances, and normative expectations. Schwartz's theory of personal values identifies 10 broad values: power, achievement, hedonism, which is the pleasure principle, for those who don't know, stimulation, self-direction, universalism, benevolence, conformity, security, and tradition. These values form a circular structure in which neighboring values express compatible motivations, while values on opposite sides of the circle reflect competing motivations. The 10 values can be grouped into two broader contrasts: self-transcendence versus self-enhancement, and openness to change versus conservation. Unlike goals tied to a specific situation, personal values operate across different areas of life and can help explain attitudes, ethical decisions, and patterns of behavior. Study authors searched databases of published scientific papers looking for studies reporting the links between Dark Triad traits and personal values. They started with Google Scholar, which, I don't know, I would caution using Google Scholar at this point just because of Google's adoption of AI and potentially corrupting the results of your query. They extend their search on PsycInfo, ProQuest, Web of Science. They use combinations of keywords focusing on the Dark Triad and personal values. After removing duplicates, their research resulted in 119 records. Screening these 119 records, the researchers identified 34 studies involving 38 samples that contained the types of research results they were looking for. These studies were included in this analysis. Overall, the results showed that all 3 Dark Triad traits were positively associated with self-enhancement and an openness to change their values, which on the surface would sound kind of curious and paradoxical to someone who would be pretty rigid, or expected to be pretty rigid in how they go about their day. But remember, they're manipulative. They want to do whatever benefits them, even from an imagined social scope of what holds them in higher regard. Or if we're talking again about honor culture, what is more likely to maintain their honor and their prestige? On the other hand, they were negatively associated with self-transcendence and conservation values. In other words, people were more pronounced Dark Triad traits tend to endorse self-enhancement and openness to change values to a greater degree, and self-transcendence and conservation values to a lesser degree. In general, self-enhancement values emphasize personal success, status, power, and achievement. Why wouldn't that be attractive for that personality type? I think to some extent we all want that, to the extent that it offers some security, but where it gets disordered is if you want that with the gross exploitation of stepping on each other. If you want to achieve those goals by any means necessary, by the gross oversweeping, like stepping on anybody that you can to achieve those goals. So again, where it gets disordered is a problem. We all want, to some extent, to feel in control, but there can be a disordered concern if, we're just a little too thirsty for power. We want to check that. We want to have people around us who care enough about us to tell us if we're getting a little gluttonous with that power. Kink play aside, self-transcendence values emphasize concern for the welfare of other people and for society more broadly. Openness to change values emphasize independence, curiosity, novelty, stimulation, and freedom to pursue new experiences. Conservation values emphasize security, stability, tradition, conformity, and the preservation of established norms. Interestingly, the researchers found a subtle difference in the strengths of these motivations. Psychopathy had the strongest relationship with openness to change, self-transcendence, and conservation. Self-enhancement was the exception, being most strongly related to narcissism. The negative relationship between psychopathy, Machiavellianism, and transcendence was twice as strong as a relationship between narcissism and self-transcendence. The author suggests this means that while a narcissistic person simply doesn't care about the well-being of others, a psychopathic or Machiavellian person may actively have an aversion to considering others' welfare. And why wouldn't they? Why would they have an aversion to considering others' welfare? So when we talk about like our emotions as signals and what activates our fight or flight responses as it relates to like our self-preservation and longevity, these personality types may have a network associated with their own survival, such that they consider like things like empathy and the well-being of others and the concept of like sharing and equanimity. They have a big visceral physiological aversion to that because it means they may get less. They reduce their power differential by sharing. So if it requires sharing to benefit the group at large, you're less likely to do that because that in turn diminishes their ability to wield that power differential to maintain control. Dark Triad traits show meaningful patterns of associations with personal values and some differences between the traits. Study contributes to scientific knowledge in the field of personality psychology. However, the study authors note they only explored associations between Dark Triad personality traits and personal values without delving into causality. And as always, we regard time and time again, correlation is not causal. Because of this, it remains unknown whether Dark Triad traits lead to the formation of certain values or if motivational goals drive individuals to behave in ways that align with their inherent traits. There are a lot of factors that inform those personalities. I mean, it's work culture, it's the culture in which they grew up in. There are a number of implicit biases that would inform the decisions they make, their household systems that would have rewarded and proliferated the likelihood of their need to develop such a challenging personality to survive. Your Google tip of the day: add negative AI to the end of your search and it will omit all AI generated synopsis. Thank you, Mondo. Did y'all see, I didn't make an announcement about this, but we added like an internet/security in all fronts channel to the Discord. If any of you all command knowledge on how to maintain like media literacy, online safety, protect your security, across the board, on and offline, there's a channel for that in the Discord. I would love for you to contribute to that when you have something to share. Why I mention what informs, culturally speaking, personalities like this is because when we're talking about honor culture, again, some of the worst traits and themes that we see repeated and sometimes are rewarded when it comes to like prestige in groups within systems that reward things like gross machismo and bravado and exploitation of others and being power hungry for the sake of security, earning that by any means necessary, and the gross exploitation of others. We see that perpetuated because of systems, culturally speaking, that we don't always have a chance to like bring awareness to because we're not taught how to look at them, examine them, which is why I wanted to come back to this and finish this, pick up where we left off yesterday and finish this. Which, if memory serves, I'm going to need to turn the volume up on this kind of a lot. So y'all let me know, pretty please, if it needs to come up higher.
I was supposed to get to this about 10 minutes ago, so I'm sorry. I went a little too slow before.
Also, this is from 2018, so some of the data he's pulling has aged.
That might seem strange, so you think suicide might seem to be a sign of weakness.
I'll try to comment where I'm aware if any data has changed since he brings it up.
Yes, right? So why would there be a link to honor? Well, to understand that, you first have to understand the general dynamics of suicide. Now, I'm going to talk about this in a fairly dispassionate kind of clinical way, acknowledging that I bet a number of you in this room have been touched by this topic of suicide
All
at
right,
some point.
I've got I turned the desktop audio up as high as I can for the duration of this. I disabled stream elements and trigger fire, so don't waste your channel points right now if you have them, because I also don't want to blow anybody's eardrums out with the alerts going off. This is just, whenever this video was uploaded to YouTube, it was curiously quiet, because I've got this maxed out and my desktop audio maxed out. It should be good now.
So it is a very personal one, a very meaningful one, but I'm going to try to be kind of dispassionate about it, if I may. So what we know from research on suicide is that there are a couple of key ingredients. First of all, the ability to harm the self, which is not natural. It's counter to our basic instincts. It is an ability that must be acquired through experiences of pain and essentially practice, which is why you see people attempting suicide in small ways, cutting and doing other things to harm themselves. They are essentially working up to the ability to more seriously harm themselves. But besides ability, you also have to have the motivation. Fortunately, most of us don't have that motivation. The key ingredients in that motivation are, number one, feeling like you are a burden on others, and number two, feeling socially disconnected. You can connect all of these ingredients, in fact, to honor cultures. The ability to harm the self, demonstrated or built up through experiences of pain and suffering, and even playing football and full contact sports where you really just get the crap beat out of you all the time as a matter of course. Or on the flip side, access to guns, which makes the ability to harm the self relatively quick and painless.
Gotta love gun culture. One of the most low effort, high reward clubs to belong to. There's very little effort to find that in group. I'm not anti-gun, necessarily. Anti-gun violence.
And you see, in fact, greater access to guns in honor states versus dignity states. On the motivational side, think about constantly living with the fear of being dishonored. You might not be fully conscious of it. You don't necessarily wake up as a male in an honor culture every day thinking, well, maybe today is the day. But there's a certain part of you that is always a little bit worried about that. Because remember, if you lose your honor in an honor culture, you might not ever get it back. And that has severe implications for your life. It has severe ramifications. And the more extreme honor cultures, it can mean social shunning, you never get a job, you never get married. So it's a pretty big deal.
Also, part of what he's speaking to here, if you think about just lifespan development from like the philosophical, like tabula rasa scope, like we're born blank slates, right? We're born having basic needs, right? We're born typically with oxytocin overflowing, especially if it's like, pardon the verbiage, but if it's a vaginal birth, or even if it's a C-section, you get less oxytocin waves post-birth, but all the same, typically a child is cradled by their mother and releasing waves of oxytocin. And we see this helping form secure bonds, kind of like across the mammalia kingdom. And many animals for that matter, but humans specifically, like we form social bonds early, we're taught to form social bonds early and develop attachments and reliances on each other for survival. Also, when we're born, of course, our heads weigh more than the rest of our body, so we're required to be cradled, and you know, almost like an evolutionary instinctual giveaway just by our shape and form that we need to be cradled and held because we can't hold ourselves upright until a couple of years into our lives. Where I'm going with that is our households early on, whoever our caregivers are the first to teach us our ability to feel safe and notice resource insecurities. So in this case, resource insecurities that a baby's going to feel are like temperature changes, or if they've soiled themselves, if they're hungry. Conversations about nature versus nurture come into play there. And principally what develops early on is sort of this like, I'm going to reference another like educational series that I took part in a while back, but what goes through a young mind, a young developing mind more often than not as it relates to their place in the world and if their needs are going to be met, like two questions. Am I safe? Do I matter? Am I safe? Do I matter? Am I safe? Do I matter? And that sort of like reassurance seeking until maybe we age into learning how to foster our own security and reassure ourselves that we are safe in the moment without having to seek that from a parent or a caregiver or a best friend. And it's okay if we have that, but it's just a measure of being able to grow and learn and to sit with that just discomfort if no one else is around to help us meet our needs. How do we get them met? And where I'm going with that is you package all of that on top of living in the Western world with this honor culture and us being social learners and all of the in groups that we participate in between family, school, work, different friend groups with different belief systems that may waver, and where there's an overlap and what gets discussed, what gets culturally reinforced. That speaks to what he's getting into here.
And if you experience dishonor and you feel like you can never get your honor back, well, then you're likely to feel like you're a burden on your loved ones. They might feel the same way, in fact, especially in more extreme honor cultures. And failing to live up to these standards of honor that your culture has given to you, has dictated for you, you might feel socially disconnected. So for all these reasons, we thought maybe there would be a connection between honor and suicide, even here in the United States, which is not an extreme honor culture, even in the South and West. So we looked at suicide rates at a state-by-state level over a period of almost 10 years. What we found, to cut to the chase, is elevated suicide rates, primarily at a regional level among whites. Unlike what you see with homicide, we found this for men and for women. And to give you a sense of how elevated we're talking about, ranging from 37% to 64% higher in honor states versus dignity states. Again, evidence for the small town effect. People living in non-metropolitan areas, if they're in honor states, seeing an elevation that was even higher than the norm for people living in metropolitan areas. And these differences, as with all differences when we're looking at state-by-state comparisons, include statistical controls for poverty and education and religiosity and even things like access to hospitals and access to guns, which we know is in fact higher in honor states. Now this graph, and I'm going to wrap up pretty quickly here, this is one of the most profound graphs that I've ever put together from data in any of my research ever. This captures suicide rates as a function of age and whether you're a white male living in an honor state or a dignity state. And what you see is at every level, starting back in the teen years, at every level there is a separation between these lines. The red line is honor states, the blue line is dignity states. And that line those lines get wider and wider apart as you get older. And it becomes exponentially increasing in its distance, in its growth in the older years. All right? We actually have a study ongoing among older men in the US right now to try to understand this a little bit better and to understand what's going on. Again, this pattern that you see here holds independent of economic factors and religiosity and all kinds of things that you can measure at the state level. To try to understand how we get to that extreme point, my colleagues and I years ago decided to look at mental health care. We found, first of all, that people who individually who endorse the beliefs and values of an honor culture about real masculinity or good femininity reported greater social and personal concerns about just the idea of seeking help for mental health needs. Again, a mental health need sort of feels like a sign of weakness, and we absolutely hate weakness in an honor culture. We hate it in ourselves, we hate it in others, and you see this not just at the social level, what will other people think, but even at a personal level, what will I think about myself if I have to see a doctor for depression or anxiety or for some other kind of mental health need. Even worse, we found from a study using data from the CDC with about 90,000 participants in this particular study, that parents in honor states, even when they acknowledged that their child had a mental health need, they were less likely to take that child to seek help. That was not true for physical needs. So Johnny's got a broken arm? Absolutely, put a cast on it. Johnny's feeling extremely anxious or depressed? We'll deal with it at home, right? We'll take care of that ourselves. Just got to toughen up a little bit, right? Man up. We have all kinds of lovely sayings like that in honor cultures. All right, so what if you have a mental health need and you live in an honor culture and you get past this sense of stigmatization and you say, I'm going to get help. I'm going to take care of this. Well, can you? Well, not if these honor-related dynamics happen at more than just the individual personal level, if they happen at a broader social level, almost an institutional level, you might find, in fact, that honor states invest less in mental health care resources. And that is exactly what you find. Mental health expenditures per capita significantly lower in honor states versus dignity states.
And it ain't gone up since 2017 when this was then this was recorded and then uploaded in 2018. It hasn't gone up. That's what he was speaking to about suicide rates amongst men across the board. Men are more likely to inflict self-harm and use firearms to do it, almost by 60%. Varying trends on that. The older they are, the more likely they are to inflict self-harm. Trends are skewing a little bit more with that. We'll look at that here too. According to KFF, overall data, this is pulled from CDC and other sources. Overall suicide rates were highest among AIAN people and males in 2024. AIAN, this is the indigenous population. People had the highest suicide death rate, 22.5% per 100,000 persons, higher than the rate amongst white people, 17.2%, while rates for other racial and ethnic groups were lower. Because white people make up much larger share of the population, the total number of suicide rates and deaths was higher. Among white people than AIAN people, 36,560 versus 545, even though AIAN people had a higher suicide death rate. Females more likely to report mental illness and attempt, but not complete. And you think of the cultural factors that affect this, like we were talking earlier, pick your resource insecurity, but it's not just resource insecurities, is it? It's resource insecurities partnered with a constellation of other systems that affect symptoms here. So in this case, talking about the worst, not that all of honor culture is bad. There's aspects of it that are rewarding for persons in the end groups they belong to, but the worst aspects of it that reward being power hungry and performing and unrealistic wealth goals or body type, or rewarding being physically aggressive or exploitative or neglectful, harmful. Systems that reward that trickle down and impact someone's interpersonal relationships and how they've been taught to interpersonally relate, such that these personality types, especially if we're talking about those Machiavellian types or others, may be more likely to, when they feel rejected or called out or ostracized for wrongdoing, may be more likely to then inflict self-harm as a coping mechanism.
Number of mental health care practitioners per capita, lower in honor states versus dignity states. Mental health organizations per million residents, lower in honor states versus dignity states. So you see a perfect storm here. The pressures of living up to these standards of real masculinity and good femininity are intense. They are every day. They never go away, because if something you have to earn is something that you can lose. You've got the pressures, you've got the possibility, you've got access to guns, you've got less mental health care, and even if it's there, you don't want to access it. So it really is the perfect storm of well-being. Let me wrap up here with a couple of concluding thoughts here. You hear people say that humans are social creatures, and that's true, but so are ants.
I was just talking about that.
So are dolphins, right? What really distinguishes us from other social creatures is that we are fundamentally cultural creatures. We are cultural animals. We learn what it means to be a person of value from the people around us, from our society. And I know you think culture, that's the thing that other people have, right? Because you can see somebody else's culture, because it's something that sounds or looks or smells different from your own. But you and I have culture too. And it shapes us often in invisible ways that are hard to see and hard to feel, at least at a conscious level, but it is there. And anytime we're studying social behavior, in any context, with any person, we are implicitly studying cultural forces. Honor is an example of one of those cultural forces that I think has profound effects on the human psyche, on how we experience life, on how we relate to one another. So our internal lives and our external lives are all profoundly affected by these forces. I'm going to wrap up with that so we have a little time for Q&A.
And he does. He does wrap up with that and has some Q&A. But that's what I wanted to close the loop on from yesterday. So that we use this information to kind of better inform your kind of posture paired with your worldview and your schema and your sense of self in relationship to others. And all of the wonderful shades of gray and nuance that compose the amalgam of which you go about your day-to-day and your interpersonal relating and how securely you relate to yourself and your other and the others in your life, paired with a recognition of how to identify the more problematic or challenging among us and how to, I don't know, combat feels like a more aggressive bit of vernacular than I want to use here, but in this case, I think it works. How you soften the porcupines out there. So there's a link to that, and I already dropped the other links from yesterday's talk on dark triad personalities back in the Discord too. So the article we went through earlier, I'll put that in there as well. When we take a break. Oh, hi, Omega. Welcome back. It's good to see you. Saw you get a little stream in. We've been missing you on the internets. Been missing you out here touching our interbutts and these interwebs. It's good to see you. Do I have a snooze? I don't have any snoozes. Is this a lie? Is this lying on me? I'm gonna snooze it. I'm gonna snooze it. I've got one quick call to action, and then we'll take a break. One quick call to action, and then we'll take a break. Pyro, very good to see you. Hope you're cozy as can be at the hotel. Passed out early in my hotel in the evening, so I'm waiting to pick up some Giordano's. It is delivery. It is Giordano's. Actually, don't know. Tell me more. Tell me more. Tell me more. Looking very sharp today. Thank you. I'm still wearing my work attire. I did give myself the gift of a little get pretty. But after sitting 90, the route to my meeting took 45 minutes. The route home took 90. When I got home, I hadn't an interest in changing. Best Chicago deep dish in like 40 minutes. Oh. I could dig it. Never have I ever tried a deep dish pizza. Never have I ever tried a deep dish pizza. I would love to know what all the fuss is about. On, you know, the yays and the boos. You like them, you holler yay. You don't, you holler boo. That is like the most needlessly divisive goddamn food product out there. It's curious how like evangelical talk about honor culture, how honor culture infects and informs attitudes around food preferences and recommendations and suggestions, and more beyond suggestions, this like sense of like you eat this version of pizza because it's correct. I don't care if it tastes good. Ah, that Pikachu me. I really don't care if it's flat, if it's sourdough, if it's crispy. I don't know why it's taking me this long to try deep dish. Okay, call to action. We're gonna take a break. Give me one sec.
The Trump administration is proposing a sweeping overhaul of how the federal government awards billions of dollars in research grants, giving
probably very
political
loud.
appointees a much larger role in funding decisions. The administration argues these changes are necessary to stop what they call a woke agenda. But researchers across many fields say this could allow the administration to effectively limit and exert more control over critical scientific research.
Yes,
Our
this
William
is
Brang
related to
has
what you
more.
posted.
Now,
And it
these
affects
proposed
all of
changes, which were
us.
put out by the Office of Management and Budget, or OMB, call for new criteria to review grants, including no funding or promoting of diversity, equity, or inclusion. Projects must, quote, demonstrably advance the president's policy priorities. And in a major change, political appointees, not necessarily subject matter experts, would be required to give the final okay before money.
It's not even not necessarily subject matter experts. They ain't. These are establishment politicians whose fund of knowledge is woefully misguided and corrupted. Like, forget science literacy, forget research literacy. They haven't a curiosity, or at least to me, expressed a motivation to be curious about even having a semblance of understanding of what either of those are. Because of the cultural attitudes that they've adopted that have made them so hyper-vigilant to any verbiage they associate with DEI. So when I mentioned earlier they were kiboshing research for transgenic mice, it's because they got prickly about the prefix for trans. They thought they were trans mice. We're not doing research on no trans mice. It's transgenic mice. Research laboratory mice being used for data collection as it related to genetic research and making medicines that save us. But also having funds available to study how to benefit the healthcare of trans persons is also good. But just to give a sense of like how pervasive and how corrupt one's like cognitive dissonance and cultural attitudes can be, and how it's actually a really good worst case example of how far someone can go when they've had otherism, divisive information spoon-fed to them for so long that they think they benefit from it, but then also thinking they're doing a greater good by cutting off access to funding research, such that they would get so prickly about just seeing the prefix trans. And this was months ago. This was like when Trump first took office for the second time. But to present day, this is what we're looking at, of like any research that uses verbiage associated with DEI or their worst fear, woke,
is awarded. For more on all this, we are joined by Craig McLean. He is the former chief scientist at the National Oceanic and...
Right, if it had to do with like testicular cancer or any funding related to like male pattern baldness or reversing aging or reproductive health, for a man, all about it, right? The DEI, if it ain't man, it's doubly so if it ain't cishet white man.
Atmospheric Administration, where he oversaw grants and awards flowing through that agency. Craig, thank you so much for being here. You are part of this organization called Stand Up for Science that is pushing back against this change. Help us understand why this would make a difference, because to some people, they might think these are relatively minor changes. You know, putting a different person at the top of the decision-making chain doesn't seem like such a huge shift. Why is this so troubling to you?
It's remarkably troubling because, first off, the Trump administration has already demonstrated its ability in the past to displace scientific judgment with their own political pronouncements. One of them is climate change, believing that it doesn't exist when, in fact, the evidence is conclusive that climate change is real, humans are causing it. So this is an administration that is quite ready to displace
Bring on the data centers, let them put out all the gas that they want.
And that's
let the data centers run on clean, beautiful coal.
To the integrity of the United States, to the safety of our people, and to the value of science itself.
I mean, OMB, in putting out their statements about this, they told us today that this, to them, is about eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse, trying to stop woke funding projects. And They argue on some level that this is the prerogative of any administration to stress the kinds of research they want and de-emphasize others. What do you make about that argument?
Publicly elected officials have always stated their preference for where the science enterprise might focus, and they state that preference by the annual appropriation, the money that Congress passes and then hands over to the federal agencies, and those federal agencies are populated with merit-driven individuals who then make the judgments as to what should be awarded where. And we also have seen the use of peer review panels where non-federal individuals, scientists, come in and evaluate proposals and then make selections. So what we're doing here that's very different is we're asking political appointees who often do not have the credibility or experience in the positions that they're in to be making those judgments instead of the people who have spent their entire careers in a position to gain the knowledge and experience as to what's the best investment scientifically.
I guess more recent, like topical examples of this, where persons of influence are affecting policy in the worst way because their cultural attitudes are so negatively impacted and they haven't the foggiest about research literacy, but portend a command of it without any acknowledgement of a conflation of correlation and causation is like Robert Kennedy. We talked about Robert Kennedy before, but him getting a bug in Trump's ear that vaccines cause autism when that had been widely debunked numerous times. There was no substantive, quantifiable evidence to support that vaccines cause autism. In fact, that vaccines have quite literally doubled the human lifespan since their advent. Fact check me on that, motherfucker. Outside of that, more recently, again, then trying to posture and postulate that Tylenol would cause autism without evidence to support it, as more recent examples of persons of influence with no scientific literacy then trying to command others because of what? Trying to dunk on them or letting their egos get in the way? Their fucking hubris is going to sink us all unless we do something about it. This is going to run a little bit longer than I have remaining to run ads, unfortunately, so I think you get the point. So the call to action before we run ads is this. You may have heard of 5 calls. You may have used them before. If you haven't, know that they exist and know that they give you a template for calling your state representatives, your senators, and putting bugs in their ears and to let them know, hey, as your constituent, it behooves you and all parties to oppose these policies because funding robust research quite literally impacts the benefit of all of our collective well-being, even if you don't agree with the foundations of which it's being implemented, even if this research may benefit the healthcare of someone that you disagree with or that goes to a different church or has a different skin color, because everyone deserves healthcare and well-being and securities and all of their resources. This helps you do that. So follow that template, and you'll have more rhyme, reason, rationale to empower your understanding of why this is important, why Project 2025 author is at the helm of this, and why we should oppose it. Follow that link, make the calls this week, show me that you've done it, and I'll gift you a sub. We need to run an ad break. Scan your body meats from your toes to your tingles. I've got tunes for you to tingle by. We'll see you in 3 Final Fantasy X when we get back.